Oh,
Cheers.
I love it. All right. All right, we're live. Hi, everyone. Friends, this is Michael Daniels. I am the founder and CEO of the app Fayr, which stands for Family Advocacy is Your Responsibility. I'm joined today by my two co-hosts, Gabrielle Hartley, the founder of the Better Apart Method, and Susan Guthrie. Susan has a lot of titles. She's currently chair of the ABA for mediation conflict resolution, but she's the founder of the Beyond Divorce podcast, which we all the time highly recommend. And then our special guest today is Michelle Dempsey. Michelle, yeah, there she is. Michelle has a podcast that everyone must follow. We'll put it in our notes here, called Moms Moving On. And she's originally from Long Island. She was a teacher, and now she's a coach for like kind of everything, like post-divorce dating and making decisions for yourself. And we're just going to get into it with her today. But she's the mother of a beautiful little daughter, 5-year-old daughter named Bella, and she's very much that. She is bellissima. Anyway, Michelle, don't tip it on me. I speak Italian. I've been there for many years.
So do I.
Do you? Okay, great. Okay, so Michelle, take it away. Tell us more about you. Let's hear all about it. Your story, your journey, how you transitioned.
First, I'd like to welcome everyone to my living room. I'm still 4 months into these Zoom things and lives, and I still can't believe I'm like watching myself at home, trying to be professional. I don't know. You said it all. I was a teacher. I had my daughter. I had a very hard time with leaving her in daycare so that I could go teach other people's children. And I thought to myself, well, I'm in an unhappy marriage right now. What happens if it falls apart? Can I survive on a teacher's salary? No, I cannot. What should I do? So I started doing what I knew how to do best, which is write. And I monetized my writing. I turned that into a marketing agency, which I still have. But my real passion is in helping other women, other moms through divorce and helping them navigate co-parenting and single motherhood. I am not an expert. I rely on experts like you guys, but I do love to share parts of my journey because it makes other women feel heard and feel seen and feel validated. And part of what you're missing when you come to the end of a marriage is that validation. You've been missing a lot of that for a long time. And I didn't realize there was a need for that until I wrote my first article about my divorce for Scary Mommy. And women started reaching out from all over. And my Instagram started exploding with messages from women saying, oh my God, I'm in my early 30s too. I'm also a single mom now. How do you do it? What do I do? How many nights should I ask for? How do I co-parent? And I was like, all I know is what I know. And from there, I started writing more and learning as much as I could, reaching out to professionals, Susan, one in particular, who really helped set me on this path towards sharing what I know and starting my podcast where we invite on real experts because, again, I am not one. I'm working towards becoming a coach, but I really just find my passion every day in getting messages from women who say, because of you, this isn't so bad. I'm trying to see the bright side. I have learned to bite my tongue and give up a little control when it comes to co-parenting, or I feel confident in myself again to start dating and look for happily ever after part 2. Those are the things that make me really happy.
That's awesome.
it is. And one of the things I know about you, because you have a very active following, right? That ability of yours to share has really struck a spark in the people who follow you. And I know you get a huge amount of outreach, and you actually answer every single direct message, email. I mean, that must take you, because I know how much you get. It must take you forever, but that's, I think, part of your magic.
Well, I'm not monetizing this. I'm not making money off of it, but at the same time, it's felt so much more enriching than anything else I've ever done. And having these conversations with real women they take me back to 3.5 years ago, and I didn't really have anyone who understood. It's very hard to be a young mom and go through divorce when your friends are pregnant with their second and third kids and still in love with their husbands. It's, so I do make it a point. Sometimes I'll apologize and say, I'm sorry, I didn't see your message sooner. Maybe 3 or 4 days have passed and somebody sent a message and they're like, I'm just happy you answered me. Why are you apologizing? But I try to get to as many as I can. And I just try to answer honestly, because I can't give legal advice. That's not my job, but I do do try and share from the heart. So thank you for
noticing. You don't need to apologize so much. You have you have a lot of confidence from within, which is such an incredible gift. I don't know if you always had that, but I bet during your divorce itself, your confidence probably was not what it was before the divorce or after. And so, I think back, like, I haven't been divorced. I've been a divorce professional for 25 years, but I grew up with divorced parents. And
that's the best teaching tool right there.
Oh my God. Yeah. Totally. Like, right. Like, I'm definitely an expert in, like, I don't know how well, I don't know, a lot of different things around how not to totally screw up your kids when you get divorced. And I was really lucky, but I was just going to say, listening to you, had there been somebody like you for my mom when she was going through her divorce, it would have been so wonderful. And because you are so user friendly and accessible, even someone who's quite reserved, as my mother is, you're just doing something that's so wonderful and so needed. And I'm so glad you're doing it. And like a missionary, that's going to turn into something else for you as you go forward. And right now, the value that you're bringing the divorcing women, the community is, it can't be underscored enough that it's just.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But I really, I'm in a world where I'm constantly interacting with divorce attorneys and mediators and judges, and you guys are like the Sherpas, because when you're going through this process, first of all, I didn't have someone like me to reach out to. So I literally like clung to my attorneys every word. And it's just, you feel like you are in an alternate Twilight Zone universe where nothing makes sense. And so it's so helpful to have people like you. And that's why with the podcast, I'm trying to connect women like me to the people who actually know their stuff, because you really, there's questions that, like, I'm embarrassed I used to have to ask, like just little things you don't know about the separation or divorce process.
Well, and you wouldn't know, right?
I imagine you must now, because we do want to get into the story of you and your husband, because it's fascinating, with learning how your whole story, when you first met and how you kind of went your own ways, and now you're back together. And of course, he's now a family law judge, am I right?
Yes.
And so you must be learning a lot about the whole family law process.
It's amazing. It's amazing on two levels, because we're both divorced, so we're both living. Like, he comes home, and if I have a complaint about my ex or what happened in the co-parenting world that day, or he has a complaint, he'll be like, you know what, you should see what I saw today, and it makes everything we live feel so much more real. Like, we understand it on different levels. And what's amazing about my husband is he's able to give me, because he's a dad going through his own co-parenting journey, when there's times where I'm like, can you believe what Bella's dad did? He's like, yeah, I would do the same thing. It's her dad, like, he's like, you need to relax, so he always has the dad perspective, and it's helpful. I mean, look, for me, I don't know if I could have remarried somebody who didn't understand divorce and co-parenting, because it is literally a full-time job, managing schedules and money. And that's why I'm so happy I have the app, because it's like one more thing in my day. I can't, it's a lot, but my story with my now husband is pretty cool. And I'm very lucky. I'm a lucky lady.
Well, it shows. You just can see on your face. I remember when you came on Breaking Free, my prior podcast, and that's actually what we talked about. And you were excited to come on to talk about something different. You said usually you were talking about divorce and all these things, and we had you come on and talk about your journey to remarriage, right? Because you were at that time a newlywed, and I thought it was pretty unique to have a newlywed on podcast. Yes. Yeah. So now you're like a year into it. You're an old married woman.
What do you think it's been? I mean, we were joking the other day, like, we've spent half our marriage in quarantine. What a way to start. No, but thankfully we love each other still, But yeah, I was the girl who, I grew up in a broken home,
Don't say broken home.
In a disjointed home. I don't know.
A transformed home. You obviously have not read my book.
You'll have to have her on your podcast.
We'll have to talk later.
Sorry,
not a broken home.
Putting myself in timeout. I grew up in not a good situation. And I don't have a relationship with my biological father. So I was the typical girl who was like, no, I don't have daddy issues, but it was like daddy issues stamped on my forehead. And I always told my mom, she's like, when are you going to settle down and get married? And I was like, never. Sorry. I wasn't the girl like planning my wedding or couldn't wait to be a bride or have a husband. Those were just not my goals. I was always a professional. I liked to work. I liked my freedom. And then I moved down here to Florida and met my ex-husband like in a blink, and we were engaged in another blink, which is definitely why we got divorced. We didn't really get to know each other. And I remember saying to my mom in that process, like, I never wanted to get married. I never wanted to get divorced, but I know there's the perfect second husband out there for me. And she was like, what do you mean? You didn't even want the first, like, what do you mean? It was like, I knew. It's a knowing. I just read Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed.
Yeah.
She talks about the knowing, like you kind of just, there's something inside of you that tells you like, there's more out there. You just got to really work through the shit and get through it and put yourself, in a place to right your wrongs. I knew what my flaws were. I knew I couldn't continue carrying them around with me. And so I knew that if I did what I had to do, I'd come out on the other side okay. And I think a lot of women look to me for inspiration, like, oh, I want to end up like you, or am I going to die alone, or am I going to get lucky like you? I'm like, it's not getting lucky. Like, sure, I have a wonderful husband and we have a great relationship, but it's hard as hell. We're both co-parents. We do the work. We have to, we go to therapy separately to work on the issues that we brought into our first marriages to keep them out of the second. Like, it's all a process, and it's not luck, it's hard work.
That's such a great point, because everybody, it looks like a fairy tale when you're watching it on an Instagram feed, and it's all the cute pictures and your daughter and, that. But co-parenting, I'm in a second marriage, and my husband is also in his, I'm his second wife. He has children. I'm a stepmother. And the journey to navigating all of those different moving parts, which is a lot of what you share in the day-to-day, it's hard. It's work every single day because you're pulled in a lot of different directions. And I love that you say that your husband kind of reels you in. Mine does the same. Yes. When I get irritated about something that my ex-husband might have done or something, it's great to balance each other out like that as well.
I need that. And he doesn't fuel my fire. He tames it, and that's important. And look, I have a fiery personality. I'm a mom. So when my daughter's out of my care and I'm also a control freak and very type A. So when something doesn't go my way, I'm like, can you believe she didn't go to bed at 8? She went to bed at 8:15. Like, oh my God. And he's like, she's going to wake up and she's going to be fine. Like, you can't control everything. And that's where I talk so much about letting go of control, because after the first year of co-parenting, I was making myself sick. Every little detail. She was 2 when we split, and she was still in diapers. So I started potty training at some point in that year. And I remember thinking, like, if he doesn't do it like me, she's never going to be potty trained. She's going to go to kindergarten in diapers. And I was always spinning out of control. And like, none of those things happened. And it was really nice to have someone to talk me down from the ledge. We all need it.
Right. Well, and you just said that, so I'm sure there are people who will see this or are listening to this who are going to go, oh, it is going to be okay. And it does often work out, but giving up that control, that's a hard thing to do.
And it's hard to expect yourself to do in the beginning. It's so new. Co-parenting is so foreign and unnatural. Like, especially as moms, you grow this baby in your body. You're a mother, you nurture it, you protect it with all of your spirit and might. And then you're like, okay, here's this person for half of its life. I have no control over that. That is a tough pill to swallow. And it takes time to find your co-parenting groove. It really does. I think people come out of it. I'll get messages from people like, I just separated and I don't understand, I want to share my child's birthday, spend the day together, but he doesn't want to spend the day with me. And I'm like, these things take time. All of it takes time until you find a groove, until the anger subsides, until everyone's comfortable. It's a journey. It's definitely a journey.
I can remember, and I'm sure Susan has heard me tell the story before. So my parents split when I was 9 and my brother was 6. And I can remember my mom walking me to school, and she, I remember her crying and whatever. And I remember her saying on the walk to school, the first year and a half is going to be the hardest, but after that, it's going to be much easier. And I can, in this moment, like sitting here right now, remember thinking like, this isn't so hard. Like, what are you talking about? Like, even though my dad had moved out, we like lived in a brownstone, and now he lived in this like 4-story walk up where like no one else spoke English in Brooklyn, like ridiculous. Like, and like we had TV dinners at his house, and my brother and I in a room, like we in the kitchen, like totally a story. Like I could tell you the story. Like Michael would be like, your eyes would roll back in your head if you heard like what my life was like as a kid. But to be honest, when you're a kid, like you're just a kid, and I want to just say that for like any of your audience members, like I have very clear memories of the fact, like I was aware that my parents were unhappy in different ways, but I also remember my mother saying to me when I was like, what happened? What happened? Like, I didn't really know why they got divorced. And I remember her saying, Daddy and I have grown up issues. You're a kid. Your job is to be a kid.
That's the best answer.
And the best answer. And I've been invited to speak at these therapist groups where like, therapists don't even always say that. Sometimes they're like, your kids deserve to know the truth. I'm like, no truth, no truth. Like, you're a kid. Let your kid be a kid.
With my own parents' experience, my dad was from a very young age, was always never really present, like he was the dad that always missed my dance recitals, and I would stand on stage and like couldn't dance, and because I didn't see him, it was like pathetic. But when my parents finally split, I'll never forget. It was like, I want to say it was in June. I was 8 years old. I remember the weather. I remember what I was wearing. I came up my driveway. I lived on Long Island, and my grandparents were sitting at my patio table in my backyard with my mom. My grandma was crying. My mom looked exhausted, and my grandpa looked angry. And so they sat me down and
right there.
They said, Michelle, this is everything that's like what not to do, but I don't think anybody knew better in the situation. Couldn't Google like how to tell your kid, Daddy has a girlfriend and he doesn't want to be with mommy anymore. He's going to be with his girlfriend. And I remember just sitting there like, okay. And then I got really upset. I said, so he's not going to live here? And no, he's going to live with his girlfriend. And he, mommy and him are going to separate. You're going to go see daddy on weekends. And I was like, I didn't know what that meant. Like, I didn't have divorced friends. I lived in a community that was very tight knit. And again, my mom was the first, just like me, of her group. And I was like, huh? And I remember I heard of all the very bad things that my father did. And then I remember going to see him on weekends, like I felt like I didn't know how I was supposed to feel around him. On one hand, he was fun and he was crazy and cool, and we went surfing and we went biking and skiing. But the underlying message was like, he's a scumbag for what he did to the family. And it was so hard as a kid. Now I have my own opinions based on facts and reality and a grown-up mind. But as a kid, I would go to his house and just have a stomachache all the time. And now I know, looking back, that was anxiety, but I knew too much at an early age. And
sorry, no, but I can remember, and my dad, I'm very close with my dad, but he was not a great husband, let's just say. And classic Italian.
You're so much nicer than me. You have such a bad mouth, you guys.
What?
You're so much nicer than me.
No, I am not. Okay, I think I'm a good person, but I don't think nice is
she's
my
not.
character.
She's not, trust us.
Yes, I am. Now I'm feeling defensive. So I can remember very clearly getting the message like, your father is an excellent father. He's not an amazing husband, but he's a wonderful father. Like, I got that message so much. Probably my mom and everybody, they were like trying to tell it to themselves. I also remember when my parents created this I grew up with shared custody, when we were like the weirdos, like everybody else got divorced, like your parents, like they get divorced, the father's gone. Maybe you see the father a little bit. My parents were like, Michael is, like, meaning my dad had us a lot, but It was almost like considered like a little off. Like, does your dad work? Like, where? And he did work. He just adjusted his schedule. Like, do you know what I mean? And like,
that's amazing.
It is amazing. It is amazing. And my dad's kind of complicated and, not the easiest. And, but when people are like, my husband can be like critical of my dad, I'm like, my dad's freaking amazing. See, I cursed.
Kind of.
Like, he showed up at a time where that just like was not normal. And, but I just think like, the messaging we give our kids is so important, and it's so hard not to trash talk your ex. I mean, for me, I think my mother is like a better person than I would be. I think I'd have a very hard time being.
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. And I actually did learn from my mom, because my mom had every reason to trash talk way much more than I do. And she never did. And her whole MO was, when you're old enough, you'll figure things out and you'll decide for yourself how you feel. And I am, I chose to leave my marriage. So my ex-husband was very angry for a long time, and rightfully so. He didn't want the marriage to end. I did. My daughter knew, based on his body language, his tone with me, she would say, "Mommy, why doesn't Daddy like you?" And I would, blow it off. This was like 2 and 3 years old. And I would say, "Bella, sometimes adults don't get along, but you have the best daddy." And like, even now, she's a little bit older, and sometimes she just wants to be with mommy, and transitions are hard for her. And I make like everything about going to her dad's fun. We do like a countdown to daddy's house. When we get to his house, I come inside, I hang. Him and I are in a good place now. So that's great. She sees us together. We do things together as a family. But even though there's been times where she's felt and heard negative about me, I always try and shift it. I take the ease off of her mind and say, mommy and daddy are silly like that. Daddy's funny like that. It's become, now she's so much more comfortable in her divorced kid's skin with how her life is, and going to her dad's, that, that's why I tell everybody, like, my ex is such an asshole. I want my kids to know. I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't. Because you will alienate them. Like,
right. And it's you're also going to screw them up, because their dad is part of them. Like, it's a very, very toxic message to give your kids, because your kids are going to, hi, Nikki, your kids are going to feel it, and they're going to think, well, if I'm part him, then I must be kind of an asshole.
Right? Exactly.
And that's really bad.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing I was going to say is, my parents brought me, or my mom brought me to a therapist, me and my brother to a therapist, just to process. I guess they were getting divorced, so you bring someone to a therapist, even though it's like 1980 and people didn't really do that so much. And I remember the therapist saying, I refused to talk. I was like, this is not my issue. This is their issue. And I was kicking my brother's chair for the whole session, apparently, because she said, and she kept us there, and she said, you realize you've been kicking your brother for 40 minutes, not like the chair. And I was like, that's all I remember. But I must have been upset and frustrated that I was stuck in there. But I remember being proud of myself that, like, I wasn't letting their shit mess with me.
Right. And I remember being the same way. Like, I just didn't want to deal with it. Like, I just wanted to like get out of the therapist's office and go back to like playing with my boombox or whatever I had at that point in my life. Like, it just wasn't, I'm like, why do I have to, I just want to go to Hebrew school. Like, it just, as a kid, you don't want to take that on.
Right. And you shouldn't have to take that on.
It's really important that message gets out, because, a lot of times co-parents who are not children of divorce are short-sighted in the sense that, like, that my ex did me wrong. I'm going to make sure my kids know and not like my ex. But 100 times out of 100 times, the parent who is trying to poison the kid against the ex is the one who loses the respect and the trust of the kid. And it happens every time. I see it a lot. I hear it a lot. It's just inevitable. So it's the one thing you literally cannot do.
Well, and think about the damage. What really struck me is when you said, after that conversation with your grandparents and your mother, then you had to go over to your dad's on weekends.
This woman who was this demon that ruined our lives. I loved her. I was like,
but you're not allowed to. She's the demon.
Exactly.
Think of where that put you as a little girl.
It was awful. And my anxiety manifested itself in all the little kid ways: headaches, stomach aches, couldn't concentrate in school. Right. And then fast forward 20 years, I became a stepmom to my husband's daughter, I was 8 when my parents divorced. She was 8 when her parents divorced. I came into it like ready. Like, I was like, I know what's going to happen here. She's going to resent me. Your ex is going to talk bad about me. And so we were like armed and ready to deal with it from the very beginning. He was like, no, that won't happen. I'm like, watch, just wait. And of course, but we know how to deal with it. The best way that I deal with it is by giving her and her dad time alone. And I remove myself from as many situations as possible, so I never feel like, I've taken her dad away from her. And I would want the same when my ex-husband meets somebody. I don't want my daughter to ever feel like this other person just came in and took daddy away. So that was very much the feeling when I met my dad's mistress turned wife. She was awesome, but she was like always there. Like we're always with her kid. And I never wanted my husband's daughter to feel that way about me. I waited till she invited me places.
By the way, you're amazing that you got, like I had the exact same experience like you're explaining when I grew up. My dad's girlfriends like needed to learn. Of course, I was me. So I was like, you need to tell them that we need our time, like right to my dad.
Yeah.
But when I met my husband, my husband right now, I've only had one, but my husband was divorced, and before
just right? One who does that?
I know, I'm like, which of these things is not like the other? Now I'm really dating myself. Now I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
The first thing I asked him was if he had kids, because I knew at that time, like I couldn't have been a stepmother. Like now that I've raised my own 3 kids, I'm in a whole different place. But at 32 years old, when I met my husband, there's just no way, because I was like, how do you do it? If you're too involved, they'll hate you. If you're not involved enough, they'll hate you. Like, it's just, especially for a daughter. So it's
a no-win situation.
And that's the hardest age, 8 to 11, meeting a new stepfather. It's like, or stepmother.
Well, I had to get used to a new stepfather when I was like 23 or 24. And I was like, what do you do? Like, who are you? Go away. And now he's my best friend and I live for him and he's the best grandpa in the world. But I knew what the challenges would be ahead of me with my stepdaughter. And they've all come to fruition, but they're not bad. It's a little girl growing up in the shadow of her parents' divorce, her father's remarriage. And I get it. And I'm there and I'm patient. And like my husband and I always say, someone's always mad at us. If we're not mad at each other, it's one of the kids. If it's not one of the kids, it's one of the exes. Like not everybody's going to be happy on the same day.
By the way, we're the same and we're not a divorced family. I mean, I text Susan like every other day. I'm like, you can't believe what happened now. You can't believe what happened now. I mean, hashtag real life, right?
Yeah. I love what Nikki is saying. My ex doesn't realize that he's the one who looks bad when he criticizes my every move. That's all going to come back on him. All my dad did was bash my mom and he was the one who left her. And I was just always like, why though? And it makes you not trust that parent at all, because that parent is putting down the person who is closest to you and who is part of you. So I agree, Nikki. He looks really bad. One day he'll figure it out, or unfortunately your kids will. Angela,
we all see that in relationships, right? Even with our friends. If nobody likes that friend who's doing nothing but just defaming, discrediting other people around them constantly, like we all look at that person as, oh, that's somebody to watch out for. So I don't know why people are dumb enough to think that it's not going to be the same for children. But yeah, let's jump to what Angela says here. She says, when you first divorced, how did you control your own emotions in front of your children?
That's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
How did you do it, Michelle?
So my emotions came out before my divorce. When Bella was about a year old, things kind of started falling apart and I knew they were headed in that direction. So I cried myself to sleep a lot. I never let her see it. I also spent a lot of time out of the house with her. We would spend the weekends going to see my family, with my mom, with my grandparents, with friends. So I was never in a place like she didn't see her dad and I fight. She didn't see me emotional. I never wanted to put that on her. And by the time we split, I had worked through my emotions. Women are different in the sense that if you know your marriage is headed towards the end, you kind of like do the work ahead of time, because for me, at least, I wanted to be as strong and independent and focused on moving forward as possible once the plug was pulled. So all of my emotions would come out when she was with her dad. I was sad that she was with her dad. I would sit in bed and eat crackers and watch like Housewives and just cry. Or I was upset that he wasn't, doing things that I wanted him to do. I'd go to my mom's and cry to her. Like, I am a big believer in therapy. My emotions, I controlled well in front of my child, but I let them out in other places. And I think that's what you need to differentiate. You need to have these emotions. You need to feel them, Angela. You need to feel every single last one of them, or you can't heal from them. You just have to make sure they come out in the right places. Maybe it's a parent who like you can vent to all the time, or a neighbor, or a friend who's divorced, or me in my DMs. Like, let it all out and put on a happy face for your kids, because ultimately how you feel in the divorce is how they're going to feel. If you're a nervous wreck and you're angry, they're going to have the stomach aches and the headaches. If you're positive and happy and okay, this is life now, they're going to feel the same way.
And by the way, you're going to be better. Like to Angela's point, like you're going to ride the wave of the grief and you're going to come out on the other side. And your kid may not let go of all that grief as quickly as you are able to, because and they're just forming.
Yes.
Yeah, stay with them for a long time.
Michelle, something I'd like you to touch on, and just going over some of your stuff. You talk about how you get flooded with DMs almost daily, and people, a lot of people express the feeling of I mean, I view it as being despair, and it's sad because when you say that people want to they're unhappy, they want to move on, but they feel like, oh my gosh, to go back out in that world. I mean, they view themselves as being undesirable, as being damaged goods, as being, those are the words you actually use in some of your literature out there. And that really struck a chord with me, because I think men and women, this is a major blow to our own self image. And so, like, how do you coach people through that? I mean, what do you tell them? What did you do?
So what I always say is, because I don't know about men. I know, well, men come out of a marriage, they want to know, am I still attractive? Am I still going to get laid, right? Women come out and they're like, am I still worthy? Is somebody still going to want to love me? It's two totally very different things. And so what I always tell everyone, my self-esteem was terrible in my marriage. But again, that last year, I knew I was going to be putting myself back out into the world. I was working out. I was like, I felt good about myself finally for the first time in a long time, because I lost a lot of my confidence in the marriage. But I came out of that marriage and I was not at all thinking about meeting somebody else. It's ironic that I did so quickly, but I didn't want to do that. I didn't want the pressure of having to like not eat a big lunch because I had to put on a tight dress to go to dinner with some new guy and impress this new guy, or, oh my God, I got to go get waxed because like I did not want that pressure. I had a 2-year-old. I just wanted to be myself and like see what the world brought. So I always say to women, stop worrying. There's 11 billion people on this planet.
11 billion.
My favorite number. Guaranteed you're not going to die alone. But right now, like, live with yourself, like be with you. Once you settle down again, guess what? You're picking up somebody else's socks and you're emptying the dishwasher that somebody didn't load right again. Like it's all the same. You're going to meet someone. Enjoy the time now. Work on yourself. What makes you feel good? I tell them to write a list. What are the things that you didn't get to do in your marriage that would make you so freaking happy to do? And I always share what I did. Like I said, it was eat chips in bed and crackers in bed, make crumbs if I had to. All I wanted to do was watch The Affair on Showtime. I watched that in like a weekend. Then I watched, I don't know, I was watching every show my ex never wanted to watch. Like, I just wanted to do me. And I did. And I colored my hair and I went tanning and all of the things I knew my ex-husband didn't like, I did. And I felt so good about myself just because I was putting that time into myself. So I think the focus for everybody, of course, there's a fear of, will I ever meet someone? Not if you're going to put more emphasis onto meeting someone. You got to put the emphasis into yourself. It's essential.
I think that's a good point. And just getting back to something everybody can relate with, it's like it's the first. There's a problem on an airplane, right? They say put the mask on yourself before assisting others, And so I think it is important self-preservation and putting a life vest on you before you're able to be there for your children.
Yeah.
But also there's a whole world of people who are like so gun shy. Like there's a balance between do you and also get out there some, right?
I think you have to be open to the possibilities. Like if somebody says, oh, I want to set you up, just go out with this guy for coffee, or come to this party. I know this guy's there who just got separated. You might hit it off. Don't shut that all down unless you're really ready. But don't make it the number one priority, because if you do, you're gonna end up attaching yourself to somebody who's probably going to be very similar to your former relationships.
That is a great point.
You're not looking into yourself. Like I have never, up until I got divorced, I'd never been single. I have had a boyfriend since I was like 14. I always had to have somebody there to help validate me. I had self-esteem issues. And I was always with the same kind of guy and like a different, like people would say, what's your type? And all my boyfriends looked super different, but inherently they were all the same. Like my type was like, make me cry. I don't know. Like my type was just not good.
You fell for assholes.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, you know, but I knew like, okay, Michelle, let's take a step back because now your daughter's watching you. You don't want to be with a guy who puts you down or who makes you feel unloved or who is indifferent to your emotions or makes you feel crazy because you have emotions. Like you don't want any of that. So what do you need to do? How do you stay away from this kind of guy? So that's really important to look at. People are their patterns. And until you can break your pattern, it's just going to be the same shit, different day, for lack of a better term.
That is so true. True that. And also, wait, another thing, because I meet a lot of women who are a little bit older, like in their 50s, and they're like, oh, people just want women in their 30s. And I'm going to say that that's not true either.
Listen, I live in Miami. I was 33 when I separated. I'm not like, you know, a grandma, but I'm not the typical Miami, like plastic surgery, perfect body. I am not that. Like I have a weird crooked tooth. I probably have like 10 pounds I still lost. And I'm just not the typical Miami girl. So even in my head, I'm like, I mean, who am I going to meet? Like I thought these guys in their 40s or late 30s wanted like the 25-year-olds, you know, who didn't have kids or any attachments. And it was so the opposite. You know, I actually found somebody who loved me for me. And that was crazy to me here in Miami where dating is awful. So it, you know, it's not hard to, it's just one of those things. I always say, it's like when you're going to a party this weekend and your friend said you have to wear a blue dress, right? And you go to the mall and you're in search of a blue dress. You will not find a blue dress because you're looking for the blue dress. And then you'll go to the party in a black dress. And then the next day you'll go shopping again. And the whole mall is filled with blue dresses. That's how I think about dating after divorce. You can't look for it. You just can't.
How'd you find your husband? How'd you meet him?
He's so cute.
He
lived in my mom's building. I'm very attached to my mom and my family. And so Bella was 2 when I separated, and I would pick her up from school every day. And I needed my mom's help because I would still have to work and take calls. And so I would pick her up and go to my mom's building. And then in the late afternoon, I'd put her in the stroller and I'd walk around the property. She lives on a marina on the water. It's very pretty. So I'd walk my daughter around to see the boats and the fishes. There was always this really cute guy, always around like 5 o'clock. He'd be on the marina fishing with his daughter. And she was beautiful. You know, his daughter's very striking. So you look, for a little girl, she looks like a model. He's gorgeous. And I was always like, and I'm not one to hit on anyone, but I would look and I noticed he didn't have a ring. And I kept seeing him. And then at some point, we were both in the same edition of the Aventura community newspaper. I was in there for something with my business. He was on the cover for something with the courthouse. And he looked me up on LinkedIn. Speaking of DMs, I don't know what signal went off when I became Signal, but my DMs became filled with like creepy guys and guys from high school I didn't even remember. But my husband took the time, looked me up on LinkedIn, read my articles, and sent me a message that will always stick with me. He said, I think you're very impressive. I would love to get to know you. And then something like very impressive work, MD, something like that. And I was like, that you don't tell me I'm pretty. Tell me you like my writing. Wow. I was so intrigued by that. And I remember asking him, like, as if I didn't Google him, I'm like, oh, what do you do?
As if I didn't Google him.
No idea.
I'm a decision maker. And I was like, okay, weirdo. Like I didn't. And so but we started talking and we didn't go out on our first date for about a week, but we talked every day, all day. And I said to my best friend, I'm like, everything is going to be different after this date. Like I just knew. And I had never had that this is it feeling. And I had that with him. Mm-hmm. And he'll tell you, if you asked, he's not home or I'd make him say it. He fell in love with me in the Uber on the way to dinner. Like he just knew that was it. He texted one of his friends and was like, I met my wife. And
I just got chills.
Yeah.
We were together every day since. It was really nice that he lived in my mom's building because he got to know the family right away. My mom would watch Bella if I wanted to go to dinner with him. You know, it was so geographically desirable. His courthouse was literally maybe 15 walking feet from my office door. Like it was right next door. So we would have lunch every day. So the nights that we had our girls, we wouldn't see each other, but we always saw each other for lunch. So we got to know each other really quickly. And I remember thinking in my head, I still had a little bit of self-esteem. I was like, this guy, this isn't for real. This is too good to be true. Or he's going to get over the fact that I have a 2-year-old. A lot of people ask me, I have kids. Will someone want to date me? I swore up and down. I'm like, this isn't going to last a year. My daughter was in the terrible twos. She was in a diaper. Like, she was pooping under his dining room table. We used to call her the poop mouse. Like, it was hard. And I swore that it wouldn't last. And I'm like, little by little, we just grew into this family before we even got engaged. And it was so nice, but we did it the right way. We did it slow. We really gave our kids the time they needed. We were very understanding of each other's situations, very respectful of each other's exes. It's a small community down here. That was something hard. You know, a lot of my friends are friends with his ex. So it was odd and awkward. And
that's hard.
There were a lot of challenges, but we took them all in stride. And, you know, if you really want something to work, it'll work. But it's a very nice story. And I feel lucky every day because it fell into my lap. But I truly believe it's because I was so intent on doing my thing and working on me and not making somebody else the priority of my life. And even to this day, like I said, I was always attached and always living for somebody else. Like, I was the girl, if a guy said, like, I like vanilla ice cream, I would go buy all the vanilla ice cream before I went to his house. I just wanted to make somebody happy, to feel good about myself. I'm not like that now. Like, I'm a little bit more selfish. I can say no when I need to say no. Do you want to go here for dinner? No, I'm not going to say yes just to please somebody. Like, we're so much ourselves in this marriage because in the past we lived to please others, that it feels good that I can be me and I can say no and I can voice my opinions without being shut down or loved less.
That's like such an important lesson for like anyone out there who has little girls, you know, to teach them the power of no and to teach it to them again and again, because like in some ways it's so easy to say no, like for me, right? I'm very good at like drawing certain boundaries, but in other ways, like I could bend over backwards. I know Susan is like definitely wants to make people happy. Like we were raised as little girls and we want to like please people.
I'm a people pleaser too, but I'm leading by example, and I made myself sick being a people pleaser my whole life. I don't want that for my daughter. And so, you know, even I forget when it was recently, my grandparents were up in Boca up until today, and I go every Saturday to spend the day with them and be with them. And I bring my daughter because I want her to understand the value of grandparent relationships. And one day we were driving up there, we were with my mom and my aunt, and my husband was at home, and she's like, Mommy, isn't Spencer going to be sad if you're away for the day, like, and you're not with him? And I'm like, honey, it's okay. He's going to survive. Like, and in the past, I would never leave my ex and I would always do what he wanted to do. And I remember like, that was a teachable moment for her. Like, you do you, honey, the right person will stick around. And I think, you know, I couldn't have set those examples in my first marriage.
That's amazing. That is like, you keep going because you got a lot of good lessons here.
Nikki's daughter invented the power of no. I like that.
Isn't that great?
Christina, great love story. Thank you. But I think, you know, it's nothing unusual. Like, our love story is kind of like us. We messed up the first time, we figured it out the second time. I have friends in their first marriages who live love stories, and they're beautiful too. So
yeah, but I think what's really special about yours, especially in today's age, is the way you met each other. I think everybody wishes they could. It's a very romanticized way. You know, you're walking by the pier, you're seeing this guy out there doing this dad thing with his dad. That's a really good story, like something you expect to see in a movie, right? Today, most people feel like there's some real shame, and because everyone's putting themselves out there in the most. It's almost like cattle, right? I mean, just out there on a dating app, and it's a little bit of a shame. People actually like lie about it. Like, oh, we come up with another way of.
I put myself on a dating app. I for sure put myself. My brother put me on a dating app. He came down from New York about a week before I met my now husband. I was like, "What are you doing? You're young. You're successful. You're beautiful. Put yourself out there." And I was like, "You're biased. You're my brother. Like, no, I don't even want to know what's out there." And he set me up on an app. I don't know if it was Bumble. I don't remember, but I remember just being like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. at the same time, I'm like, this guy's too hot. He probably won't like me. This guy doesn't have kids. It probably won't work. Like, you get into your own head so deep that like you talk yourself out of it before anything happens.
But Michael, to what you just said, it's funny because you started to say you really liked how they met with the fishing, but I didn't know what you were going to say, and I was thinking I really love that he wrote. Now maybe he thought you were gorgeous and he made that crap up about the LinkedIn, but let's
Maybe he never read anything.
Let's just say he really liked your brain. Like, that's so entitled. Like, to me, that's what I was like, oh my God, because like I can't get my husband to read a thing that I write. Like, I write books, I write articles. I was like, oh, read something that I write, please. That to me sounded so romantic. Versus,
I think for him, because he had been out in the dating world for a few years before we met, he had his fun. He met all the hot Miami chicks, and
you're still a hot Miami chick.
But
you are. Stop it.
I think I completely overlooked substance, and that maybe substance was important too, because we live in such an aesthetic society. I completely overlooked that I could be valuable for things other than whether or not I had implants or, fake teeth. I don't, but we overlook that. And so that's also very important to stress, because you don't want, you as an adult woman, you want to go out there into the world with the same advice you'd give your kids. Like, it's what's on the inside that counts. But it's true. It really is.
It is true. It is true.
It is true, but it makes a difference if you're living that, or if you're telling them that and you're living some other truth, right?
Totally. Great point.
Yeah. I mean, so I think, and one thing that really strikes me about everything that you're saying is mommyhood, becoming a mother, really not changed you, but really sharpened your focus for you, because you've said several times as we've been talking that you take very seriously and you consider the example you're setting for your daughter.
I mean, and that applies to lots of different areas in my life and things that I've had to overcome. You meet this tiny person and you're like, I only want the best for you. So that means I have to do the best for me, right? We lead by example. And I had a great example of that in my mother, who had every excuse to probably just like fold up shop and give up and like run away and join the circus, but she didn't. And like, she used her resources and made herself better. I remember when she separated, she found two friends that she was connected to who had also just separated. They called themselves the First Wives Club, and they were happy and confident and did girl things and girls' weekends. And they just lived happy. And I had to live happy. And with that came learning to shift sort of things that I would prioritize, whether it was looks and diet or, I don't know, caring too much what people think, all the things that I don't want her to do, I can't do. It's important.
No mixed messages. We're all quiet
because we're all thinking like, oh, that's so hard.
No, it is. It is. Like to this day, she's like, Mommy, you're always going to the gym. Or how come you always eat broccoli? And I'm like, Mommy loves to be strong. Mommy wants to be able to pick you up when you're, 10 years old. And like, it's always about, I never want her to think like, Mommy's trying to lose 10 pounds again. It's more just about taking care of me. And this is my time for myself. And this is where I let off steam, and it's healthy to do that. I want her to play sports to feel good and strong and not anything other than that. So every day is an opportunity to lead by example.
Well, and you put a lot of that. I don't want to let this time go by without talking about your Instagram feed.
Thank you.
Because as you know, that's how I met you. That's how I found you. And for anyone who's watching who isn't following you, it's at the Michelle Dempsey. But one of the things that I think makes you someone who has attracted so many people to come to you for advice or for setting an example is you are very real in what you post. I'm thinking of one post you put out, I think it was yesterday or maybe the day before. I reposted it yesterday, and it said something about, I'm one of those moms who can't wait for my kid to go back to school. And I'm also the mom who's dreading my kid going back to school. And I read that and I was like, there are probably a million mothers out there who are double tapping that thing because they can so relate. Have a gift for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think, it's all about, I think I remember at one point in my life feeling not good enough. I always dealt with those feelings of not being good enough, not being smart enough, not being pretty enough. Maybe I'm not well liked enough. I feel like I come from this place of like wanting everyone around me to feel worthy and feel good and not feel alone, because I know how not nice that felt for myself. So I think that's where that comes from. I know that's where that comes from. It kills me to know that, somebody is bullied or not feeling good about themselves. Like I'm not okay with that. And that's where I need to plug something for you guys. I started an Etsy shop. Back in the beginning of quarantine, there were lots of reports down here in Miami about the rise in domestic violence and women and children who were being affected. There is a center in Miami called the Lotus House that takes in women and children who escape domestic violence situations. All of the proceeds from my Etsy shop go directly to them. I don't keep any of it to myself. So my Etsy shop is Self-Love Swag for Women. And if you want to purchase something, you'll be helping women and children who need it. That's something that's really important to me also.
Awesome.
We'll be sure to put that in the notes for this and as when we post it later. But yeah, we do want to make sure to let everybody know your handles and of course tell us about your podcast, kind of like the things you discuss, because I think it's important for women who are contemplating divorce or maybe recently divorced or whatever stage they're at. I think there's a lot of value there. So why don't you go ahead and plug that too?
Sure. So my Instagram is the Michelle Dempsey. My Facebook is the Michelle Dempsey. I have a private Facebook page in correlation with the podcast called Moms Moving On. Just request to be added and we'll add you. And that's kind of like an open platform for everybody to vent. Like, can you believe what my ex did with my child this weekend? And everyone's like, and it's a really good place to vent because everybody understands each other. My Twitter is Michelle D. Writes. The podcast, which is my baby, is Moms Moving On. It's available on iTunes and everywhere you can listen to a podcast. Every week we bring on somebody to either share their story or educate, like lawyers, mediators, therapists. Next week, I'm recording with one of the Real Housewives of New York. I'm very excited.
Phenomenal. Look at that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm really excited. She sets a great standard when it comes to co-parenting. So I really want to get her on and help people raise the bar in terms of how they handle their co-parenting. And those are all the things I do. Like Susan said, I am very accessible. I want to hear how you feel, what's going on, because it helps shift my content to be more helpful. I don't just put it out there in vain. I really want it to help those who need the help. So let me know. Let me know what you need.
So awesome to finally meet you, Michelle.
Finally, you too. Where in Brooklyn did you grow up?
Carroll Gardens, before it was Carroll Gardens.
Got it.
And Bay Ridge also.
I was on 86. I was East First and Avenue X, but I grew up hanging out on 86th Street.
Oh,
okay. Christina's asking who. I'm assuming Christina or one of our listeners. Which housewife? Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Oh.
I don't want to jinx it because this might be the best I've ever had. I'll just say she's blonde and she's a co-parent.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Why don't we just make sure, Christina, that you chime in to see that episode on? So Moms Moving On.
Yeah, it's a great podcast. I was so excited when you decided to do a podcast. I was like, oh my God, you're of all the people who should be doing a podcast.
It encouraged me too, but also I would get messages like, where can I find your book or your podcast? And I was like, I don't have any of those. So hold on. Which can I do first? And I got the podcast up and running.
That's awesome.
Well, you should do a little book of your Instagram posts too, because they are, or put them on T-shirts and sell them in your Etsy shop.
That's what I'm selling my quotes.
Good.
And also this necklace I just put on the shop.
I saw the necklace.
It's not expensive. It says keep it moving because that's kind of my, gotta keep moving forward. $40. All that money goes to the Lotus House. So.
I love it. It's a domestic violence shelter. Fayr actually supports a domestic violence shelter that's near and dear to my heart up in Connecticut, the Center for Family Justice. So
awesome.
That is a cause that's near and dear to all of our hearts. So I love that you're doing that.
Well, we can't forget to end this without me talking about how helpful the Fayr app has been. It's ironic that you guys reached out to me because I remember in the beginning when we had to choose an app, my ex-husband was all about Fayr. I was like, I never heard of it. I don't, what do you mean? Why do we need this? And then utilizing it, I was like, oh, this is why we need it.
That's like the best story I've heard yet. That's so organic. It came from her ex-husband.
I know. I'm kind of blown away because women are what push this app.
He told me, he was like, you owe me a cut from your fame and fortune today with Fayr. I'm like, no, I don't. Thanks for the recommendation. But he was like, don't forget to mention me. But he's happy that, this is the one we chose too, because for me, it's very helpful with the schedule, especially since quarantine started. We have our schedule mapped out for like months ahead of time, but there's been so many changes. He's had to help me on days where I have to work. I have to help him on days that he has her and he has a meeting. So our schedules are constantly changing right now. So the app helps tremendously, and the most with tracking expenses. When you're 50-50 like we are, and we're both 50-50 responsible for expenses, I'm with her more than he is. I end up paying for more. So I like keeping track in a way that isn't like jotting it down on paper and losing the paper. So it's essential in my mind. You can't co-parent. And then there are blogs that come out, and then like little tips. Like it's great. It reminds me every day why like we really just can't do this alone.
It's like, thank God for tech, right? How did people do it in the old days? Gabrielle and I know.
I say to my mom, like,
tell us about that, Gab. Tell us about the old days, Gab.
How do we keep friends out? How do we like meet up with people? How do we have social lives? Like, I don't even understand how it used to work.
Yeah, I know. I'm so content in my quarantine life. I'm embarrassed to admit. Like,
I know.
I love it.
Well, we have a custom code for Michelle out there. So anybody watching this, or Michelle, of course, you're going to push it through your channels. But you just go to befayr.com or fayr.com. It'll send you a link to sign up. And you just put in the promo code Michelle, and you'll get a 20% discount on any of our subscriptions. And you get monthly, annual, and 3-year options.
Yes. And I promised my email list. A lot of people wrote back and said they couldn't be on it this time, but they really wanted the discount code. So I promise I will send the link to the live with the code to my list tonight. So if you're not on my email list, sign up on my link in bio now.
Yay.
Yeah,
definitely follow Michelle. It makes my day every day when I'm scrolling through my feed.
I was supposed to come to Chicago this summer, and I was going to put you down, and we had a wedding July 4th originally that obviously got canceled, and I'm so glad. But one day.
Well, one day, or I'm going to get down to Miami, but I will see you. So, and Michael's right near there. You guys have.
We're doing lunch before long.
Good.
Whenever COVID lifts a little bit.
Good. A socially distanced lunch at a big table.
Yes. Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies.
Michelle. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.